Hi, in this video we will have a look at Power Automate action step send email with options. Let's have a look at that. Okay, you can see here in Office 365 Outlook connector, which allows to send the list of options in the email and record the response received from the user. So that means if I target one of my email address which is outside the domain, so this could be a Gmail address or a Yahoo address or any email address, and here in the subject I'm going to have my scenario is more like approve invoice, and how I can put the usage options here. So I'm going to add here approve, reject. Next action step, I want to make some decisions based on the response. The response is going to be either approve or reject. So that is selected option user response is equal to approve. So then I can continue my business logic under the yes action, or if it's reject, it should go under the no action. So this way we can extend the flow. Then what happens here is once you send the this action step is executed, the flow is going to wait until the response come back from the user. So let's run this flow now. Okay, for the demonstration purpose I am using the manual trigger here. So you might have a business scenario more like when a record is created, that means when an invoice is ready, then send email with options. Okay, so I ran the flow, and you can see the action step has sent the email. So that means the next step only execute when the user has approved or rejected. Okay, so if I go back to the flow, you can see my flow is running now. Because I run from the test menu, that's the reason it's called test running. Okay, so let's go back again. So as you can see here, it is still waiting there. So let me open my email and show you the approve and the reject. Okay, right, you can see my email received the approve invoice message, the email, and the user is going to typically do either approve or reject. So I'm going to click on approve. So the action is complete and it said thank you. And if I may go back now, see the flow has run successfully now. So that means if I go back, flow it says flow succeeded now. So earlier it was running, now the flow is succeeded. Okay, so let me just go back again to the run history of the flow. You can see under the expression it is true now because I set that as approved. So that's the reason it is going to the yes condition now. Okay, so in this video what we are more focusing on here is so this is the way the out of the box the send email with options works. But majority of the organizations, when they start using it, there are lots of challenges here. The challenge here is it is targeting a person to approve the invoice. Either it's approve or reject. What happens if the person is not responding the email? So that means we may have a lead days for approval, such as like a 1 day or 2 days. So what happens after a day? The person hasn't send the approval or reject. So that means we need to send another reminder email. Okay, so how can we send the reminder email? So remember, when we are going to send another reminder email, that means we need to send again another send email with options. So that means there are two instances of the flow is running then. So the first one, which the user hasn't responded, and the second one also the new reminder email which is waiting to receive then. So what I will show in this video is we can send the reminder emails as much as we want, and that means we may have more instance of the flow running, and then one of the email which we will open and to do the approval or reject. Once that's done, I will show you how to cancel all the other runs as well. Okay, so that's where we are more focusing on this video actually, how to skip and to do the reminders and also cancel all the other runs, which is more important here. I have seen lots of questions in the Power Automate community regarding this. So watch for the next flow which I'm going to build. And for this demo, I have made a couple of tables which I'll go through in a minute. Okay. Right. So for this demo, I'm using the Dataverse custom tables which I created: customer invoices, email reminders, invoice approvers. You can replicate the same in your own favorite database, such as SQL or any other. And also you can replicate the same in same list in SharePoint as well. Okay. So let's have a look at the customer invoices. So that's the schema I created. So name, then there's a total price and approval. So there is an option set value which I put. So that means default it will be waiting for approval. Then once the customer has approved, it will set to approve or it will set to rejected, and also have a cancelled one and a system cancelled one also there. I just put the cancelled one which I'm not going to use it. You can use that also in your email, such as like approved, rejected or cancelled, and then the system cancelled is the one I will use that later on when we have multiple instances of the flow is running. Remember I mentioned about sending the reminder emails, so that's where I'm going to set system cancelled also. Okay, so that's that schema. So the plan is whenever an invoice is created, a new customer invoice is created, I set a total price, then immediately flow will trigger and send an email with these options such as approved, rejected. That's the plan. Then I have got a second table which is called email reminders. Okay. So again, there's a name field here, and then the customer invoice. So customer invoice is a lookup. So that means I am connecting this to the customer invoice record which has been created. So that I can easily track against this email reminder or this email sent against such and such invoice. That's the reason. Okay. Then there is a email token ID I'm using. So this is optional. If you don't want it, you don't need to use it, but I'm using this email token ID. So that means this email token ID is related to the customer invoice ID record. So this invoice record ID. So let me show you the ID here. So in Dataverse, when you open the record, you can see in the URL ID equals such and such. So that's the one I am using here for the email token ID. Okay. Then I have got the flow ID. So flow ID means I have got a flow which I written, which I'll show you that in the build. That is the flow ID, which is responsible for sending the email and waiting for the response to come back. Then the flow run session ID. So that means for every flow when we are going to run, there is a session ID there. So let me open this, and if I may open this record here, you can see here there is a run here. See that run ID? This is a session ID of that run, the flow actually, and this is the flow ID which I mentioned. Okay, so if you're running 3 times, you will see you can see here that is the flow ID, and this is the session ID. Okay, so let me go back again. So that's that. So this is all useful when we are going to use later on when we sending the email and canceling all the other the other session of the flow running instance. Okay, then the email reminder sent. So that means when the whenever an email the system is sent, I'm capturing the date and time also there. Then the email status. Again, I'm using the same option sets which I used for the customer invoice. So for every email when I send, whether it's a first email or the subsequent reminder emails, it will contain approved or rejected, and the default will be waiting for approval. Again, the system cancelled here. We need that because if you're going to send another reminder, then we will be having two instances of the flow running, which I mentioned earlier. Okay, so that's the reason I need a system cancelled also, which I will explain it how I'm going to use that. Okay, then the customer oh, there is another customer invoice also come around here. Okay, just ignore that, this is a mistake. Okay, so this is the new email reminder record looks like. Okay, this table, this is optional. I have used a configuration entity. This is more like a configuration entity I'm using here. So that means you can extend it for first level approval or second level approval or third level approval also for the send email options without using the Dataverse, the Microsoft D365, sorry, the Office 365 have got a flow approval also, but that only works within the organization only. So here I'm using the first level approval as a name, and then this is the email. So that means whenever a customer invoice is created, I'm using this email to send for the approvals. That's the plan. Okay, like I mentioned, you can have more than one record here for second level approval and third level approval, which I will explain that in my next my upcoming videos. So this is all about is only the first level approval, only one person is approving, but we are going to send a reminder email if the person is not responding that in the right time. Okay, right, so these are the tables and the schemas which I explained. Like I mentioned, you can always always go and create a SharePoint list, and you can create these fields similar like option sets, and also for the email reminders, again another list, and there you can, instead of the lookup, you can also create the relational the list IDs from one ID to the another list. That relation also you can create similar way. Yeah, so that's this. Now the plan, the first flow we need to build is, the plan is whenever a invoice is created, we need to send the very first email. Okay, so and then there is a subsequent email we need to send. So that means the person hasn't sent for more than a day. We need to keep track of another flow. So very first flow is, let me explain it in a notepad that. Okay, so the first flow is when a new invoice is created, send initial email. So number two, so for every email we can set a lead days. So that means within a day we need to get the response back. So that means if the response, if no response for more than a day, that means again send reminder email with options. So options means approve or reject. There we go. And then there's a final one, number 3. Okay, before I go to number 3, we need, so for if no response more than day, send reminder with the email options. So that's the second flow. Yeah, and then the third one is the cancel reminder of the cancel reminder flow sessions. So that means if you send more than one send email with options, we need to cancel the other ones once the user approved the relevant the approve or reject. Okay, so that's the third option, cancel reminder flow sessions. The fourth one, I got another flow also. So that is mainly I'm using for a send email, send initial email and reminders. So this is more like a HTTP option, HTTP child flow I'm using. Okay, so that's the plan here then. And if this is the other one is response is more than day, so this is more like a scheduled trigger running every day. So there I work out if the person has sent the email or not, the response or not. So how I finding it? Using this entity, email reminder entity, which I got enough sufficient evidence of whether the person has approved or not. I can have the status, I'm utilizing it in that flow, and also I'm going to utilize the email send date so that I can work out if it's more than a day or not. Okay, which I'll explain it in a minute. So these are the four flows we need to build. Okay, so let's start building the very first flow. Okay, so the first flow is when a new invoice is created. Okay, so I'm going to put the name when invoice is created, and here my trigger is the data verse when a row is added or deleted, and the trigger type is added. The table name is customer invoices, and the scope I'm going to choose here the organization then. Yep. The next step, I'm going to send the email. So that means like I mentioned earlier, I have used a child flow for that. That means I can use the same flow for sending the reminder email also. So to use that child flow, I need to use a HTTP. Okay, here I'm going to use the post. And in the child flow, once we built the child flow, we need to put that URI. So currently I'm going to put HTTP : / to replace this URL, something like that now. Yeah, and then what we want here is we want to use the body. So the body contains there are two parameters I'm passing. So we need to put two curly brackets, then double quotes is first email. I'll come back later why we want to use this, because when a new row is added, the very first email is sending out, so I'm setting the flag as true. The second one, I'm using email token ID. So remember the email token ID also I mentioned, which is in this record here, the email token ID. As I mentioned, that's the ID of this customer invoice record. Okay, so here I'm going to map the ID here. So if I take you down here, see, you can see customer invoice unique identifier of entity instances. That's the ID I'm using. That means the record ID of the trigger, basically. Yeah, okay. So these are the few things we need to use here now. Right, so it says enter a valid URI. Okay. Let me believe it's validating with the, is it HTTPS is need? Okay, let me save this with, okay, that's the child flow URL going to be look like. Okay, let's go back and build the second flow now. So this is our first flow. We'll run this all later once the build is done. Okay, so like I mentioned, the very first flow, it's as a trigger we set, then there's a child flow we are running, and then that means I can save some steps. I could utilize in the same logic here, but it's going to get more complicated then. So the best way is trying to get that logic out into a common component, and that common component is responsible for sending the initial email and also the reminder email with options. Okay, so that's first flow going to look like. Okay, let's build this flow now, which is the next one, the sending the email. Okay, so let's start building the second flow then, which is send initial email and reminders. Okay, for that I'm going to use the HTTP request. Here it is. Then the JSON request body JSON schema. So I set two flags in my previous flow, the HTTP body, which is the payload is going to be like this. That is first email. That is true or false. You can type any values, true or false here for generating the schema. And the second one is the email token ID, and that's an ID which is a string value. So you can put as ID here, something like that, and then click done. So that's generated the schema for me now. Properties is first email and all. Okay, I will put the schema in my video description. Right, the next action step we need to use here is there are a couple of things we need to couple of steps we need to use here. So this is going to be the longest flow of the whole build. Okay, so the next one is a variable. So that is the initialized variable, and I'm going to say here approver email. Okay, and that's a string, right? And the next one is the email subject. Again, another variable I need to use. So let's search for variable. And here I'm going to use email subject, and the type is string. Okay, we will use these two variables further down the flow action steps below. Okay, so the next one is remember I have got the invoice approval configuration entity where it stores my email to whom which I need to send the email to. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is always optional. You can hard code this value directly in your send email with options action step. But here I'm not using that. I'm using a configuration entity also. So for that I need to know the value of that. So to get that, I'm going to read the Microsoft Dataverse list rows action step. I know it's going to be only one record there, and here I'm going to use invoice approvers. Okay, and once that's done, then the next step is, remember I set approver email. So use the set variable. Approver email and map the email. So always search email there, so you can see that's the email here. So let's go back and show you the record. See, that's the email. Okay, so email is my schema name which I'm going to map. That means I can see here it is the email. Okay, so Power Automate puts an apply to each loop. I know it's only one record. If it is more than one record, and if you want to target a specific record, you need to use the filter rows or data query. Have a look in my video, other videos where I explain how to filter the records. Okay, so that's a set variable done. And the next step I need to use here is, so this is the most important step in this. So I'm going to use another parse JSON action step. and here in the content I'm going to use an expression called workflow. What that does is it exposes a couple of properties of this flow. That means send, email, reminder, and initial email and reminder. The current flow, when it's running, it exposes certain values, certain properties. So the schema is going to look like, I have copied, I already got a copy here for the schema, and just go through that. It contains a name, ID, and the location of its running. Then a couple of other types like run ID and name and type, etc. Okay, so a couple of things we need, going on here. Actually, there are certain values we need that to store under the email reminder table actually. So if I may open this, so the flow ID which we can get from that Parse JSON stuff we just added, and also the session ID. So these are the two important things we need. That's the reason we are using that step, this for flow. Okay, this is most important step in this. Okay, the next one is very straightforward. So next I'm going to use an action step called condition, and inside the condition I'm going to say here is first email. See, that's in my body actually. Remember, in the body we pass that value. So is first email is equal to true. So again I'm going to use expression here, true here. Then under the action step, I'm going to use set variable. And remember, that's our second variable I put here, email subject. The first one is the approver email, which we got in this step, and now here I'm using this approver, the email subject. And for that I'm going to say something like invoice amount approval. You can put a reference, and reference I'm going to use that email token ID. That is ID of the invoice record basically. Yeah, so that comes up in your the flow then nicely. So this is the first email, and for the no means this is first email. The second time when we're going to send the reminder, that means the user hasn't responded in time. That means it's going to be false then, which I'll show you later on. And so that means we need to have another action step. Again, I'm going to use set variable here. Same, email subject. And for this, I'm going to copy this. Control A, Control C. That means it select everything, and just press Control V here. That's a shortcut I generally use. Then in the beginning, I'm going to say reminder. So that's the reminder approval. Okay, so that's that. Once that's done, I'm going to minimize that. The next action step is I'm going to store all these values in my Dataverse also. So that means I'm going to use Microsoft Dataverse, add a new row. Remember, what we are going to do here is we are going to create this email reminder record. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, the very first email and also the subsequent subsequent email reminders, everything is going to store under the email reminder table. All right, okay, so that's email reminders. Right, so the very first thing I'm going to use here is a name. The name I'm going to use invoice reference the email token ID. That remember, the email token ID is coming from the HTTP body. Okay, the next one, it's a lookup. So that's the lookup of this record here, customer invoice, see, invoice 101. That's the lookup. So for that, the syntax is going to be like this: slash your schema name. Mine is called AJB underscore customer invoices. That's my field name for that. And then in two brackets, again the ID of the record. Okay, that's a lookup. That means it links to the invoice one. So it's going to be something like this then once we create the record. So it's linking the record to the invoice one record. See that? That's a lookup. Okay, and then the email reminder sent. Okay, I'm going to utilize that utcNow here. That means it's using the current date and time. the next step, which I mentioned earlier also, like the default is going to be waiting for approval. Okay, and next is the email token ID. So email token ID, again, I said it is the email token ID is optional, but I like to use that ID as well here. So that's the email token ID, okay, which is the ID of the record. We got the lookup here. That's the reason, we don't need to use this. Then the flow ID. Okay, the flow ID means the current flow. Okay, so basically you need to save the flow first and then get the ID then. Okay, so let me save the flow first. Okay, I saved the flow. Let me go back and edit the flow again. So that gives the flow ID here. See that? So that's ID we need to use there. So remember, this ID will be different for from every flow is a unique ID, so it's very different if somebody is following this video, and if you're creating a flow, don't expect the same ID there. Okay, so that's the ID there, the flow ID. Okay, and then the flow session ID. Okay, the flow session ID is a tricky one. So I'll explain it that the flow session ID is this, the tooltip. You can see that is coming from our parse JSON step, the previous one, and the syntax you need to use is body parse underscore JSON run name. That gives you the run session ID, which I explained to you earlier. The run, once you start running the flow, and if you're going to look the run history, you can see here /runs. Then there is an ID there. That's what that means. Okay, and again I'm going to put this expression in my video description. Okay, so that's where it's coming from. Then in the parse JSON here, you can see parse JSON. Then there is a tag called run. Under that there is a name there. So if you scroll down here, you can see here there's a run, and then there's a name here that contains the session ID, which is very important for this flow. Okay, so once that's done, and then the status reason by default is active, you can set it to active here. Okay, so that's only for the database. If you're using SharePoint, it doesn't matter the status reason, unless if you got a custom one or something. Right, once it's done, it's it's quite easy now. The send action, send email with options. Here it is. So in this, I can say now the approval. So I'm going to click on dynamic here and say approval email. And the subject, again, I got custom subject, the very first, and the reminder one. Remember, under the condition we set, this is the first one, first email subject it will goes, and then the subsequent reminder, it will contain the reminder also in the subject. So that again, it's dynamic that. So that is email subject. Oh, let me remove this. Yeah, email subject. And then finally we need to have approved, comma, rejected. Okay, that's the response we need to take. Once that's done, we need to do a couple of things here. So that means, remember, when the initial record get created, we need to set that value also, and also we need to set under the right email reminder as well. So this is mainly for the audit trial which I put. It's a good practice to have that, so that we exactly know that against which email, the initial email or the reminder one, it set the email status. So that means we need to update that send email options value in 2 places. Okay, so for that, the next action step is a condition again. So in the condition, I'm going to use selected option is equal to approved, and then it's the update row action step we need to use. So that is update a row, and here I'm going to use the customer invoices. That is the very first time when the user create, and here remember the ID I'm passing, that's the ID I need to use for updating the record. So if I use the email token ID, so that is actually, oh sorry, not that, the email token ID from the trigger. Remember that's the one we need to use. And here the approval, and under the approval, that means it's approval. That's done. Okay, so there's an easy way to do this is, let's copy this to my clipboard and then add an action step, go to my clipboard and paste it again here. So that means it's added the second action step here, and here we are going to say it's exactly the same thing. So here it's approved, remember, and here it is going to be rejected. Okay, so that means we done that job. So this is about the customer invoice record. See this one, that's one we are trying to set there. The next one is about the email one, we need to do it. So we need to another action step, again add an action, my clipboard, and use the same action step, but here the email the table name is different, so we need to use here the email reminders. There we go, that's the second table we have. But here we need to have the ID of the other database one, which is the email reminder. Here we go, email reminder, add a new row. That means we just updated that earlier. Then we send the email so that we can update the status back here. So that's the email reminder you need to use. Okay, and then again okay, so I need to somehow refresh this. So I basically added again that step. I couldn't use the same one because it messed up the schema names. So I added again the new update arrow action step, set the email reminder as a table, then the email reminder which we created the new row, that's the ID I'm using to update. Then again the status I'm going to set here as approved. Okay, now I can do the copy mechanism again here, copy that and go to my clipboard and paste it here. Okay, so here all we need to do again here is change that to rejected. Okay, so that's the last step we added. So that's basically the build of the flow for the the sent email, initial email reminder. Okay, now we still need to build two more flows for this, okay, which are very small flow compared to this one. This is the biggest build out of the 4 flows. Okay, so let's build the third one. Okay, the third flow is about sending the recurrence every day, finding which email is pending for approvals, which user hasn't sent approved the invoices. So for that I'm going to use a recurrence scheduled one, and I'm going to put that as every day. Okay, then here I'm going to use again Microsoft database list rows. So here I'm going to, in the email reminders table, I'm keeping track of which email has been sent against which invoice, and is that email status will give me the indication about whether it's approved or not. And also I have got an email reminder sent date and time as well, which I set. So that means I can utilize all that to find which are the records we need to send the reminder out. So for that, again, I'm going to use email reminders, and in the filter rows, I'm going to use an expression which is, I'll explain it, that's going to be like this. So that means, let me put a comment or add a note. Yeah, add a note here. That means I'm going to say here like filter by waiting for approval, and we are waiting for approval. Okay, so that's the option set value, which is, if I may open that, see that's option set value waiting for approval. Okay, so behind the scene database has got a number there for that. You can get that from the schema. And then email reminder sent less than the format date. That means if it is yesterday's date, that means we haven't received that, received the response back in time. And that's where I'm finding it. And also I am going to put a sort by description also. This is optional, Then the next thing we need to do here is, remember, if I'm going to use, if I'm going to get the records from this action step, the list rows, I may have more than one record against that email token ID, which is invoice one. So that means, the first initial email sent, and if the user hasn't responded in time, we are sending another email, and next day we are sending another email. So every time we will be having a token ID which will contain the same ID of this invoice 101. Okay, but remember the flow session ID will be different then. So that means we'll be having 3 records here. So that means we want to find one record only. We can ignore all the other 2 and send the remainder email. So how to do that? So this is the trickiest part here. So for that, I'm going to use the select action step, and then just add a note here called select email token. And for this, the value which is coming from the previous one, and here I'm going to say email token ID and search for email token ID. Here we go. Oops, sorry, it's in the other column we want. Okay, here it is. The next one, we want the unique value here. So again, I'm going to use an expression and rename this to get unique email token. Okay, and for that I'm going to utilize the expression which is going to be like this: body of the select, comma body of select. So what that does is it eliminates the duplicate values and give us a single value only there. And then it's all very simple step. So that means this is going to have more than 1 records. So invoice 101, invoice 102, or invoice 103, etc. Whichever is the pending ones. Okay. So for all that, we need to send the remainder emails. So again, I'm going to use and apply to each loop here for that. Right. And then map the output of the get email token. Right. And then I'm going to use the HTTP action step. Remember, we already put the send email with options in the other email, the second flow, which we did earlier. So that's that. And the post. And once you save the second flow, you can edit, then you can get the HTTP, the value there. That is that. It's the same thing we need to copy for the very first flow as well, the invoice one. So it's the same URL. Okay. So once you save the flow, get that dynamic URL which flow will give you, which is going to be looks like something like this. And again, here, because this is responsible for sending the reminder emails. Okay. So that means it's retrieve records waiting for approvals, and inside the body, that's what I'm going to use. This is not my first email. That first email is already passing from the very first flow which we built that we set as true. So here we need to set it to false. Then the email token ID, again the email token ID is coming from this step, each apply to each question mark email token ID. That's the format you need to give there. Okay, so remember that is also, that's another syntax you need to remember. Right, so that's that. So that's the email token ID, and that's the one it's iterating the each of them. So that means we built the third flow. Now the final flow is like I mentioned, is all about is once the email is approved, we need to find is any existing one is pending as running, we need to cancel it. That's where we are going to use the system cancelled option set, which I mentioned earlier. So if I may take you here, you can see here system cancelled one here. So I will set it to system cancelled also. So that means we know that once it is approved or rejected, we know that is coming from the user, and the other one is flow as manually is automatically cancelled it. So this is, like I mentioned, the system cancelled is mainly using for the audit trial, nothing else. Okay, so let's build the final flow now. Okay, so let's name that as cancel reminder flow runs. Again, I'm utilizing the dataverse here, and I'm going to use when arrow is added, modified, or deleted. Add a note here, so I'm adding a note. So it's the best practice. If you can put some decent comments here, it's very easy to use. When you look at the flow in the future, it will be really easy to understand what's going on here. So rejected by user. Okay, and this operation is always going to be a modified operation, and the table name I'm going to use here is the reminder email reminders. Then the scope, so scope is again the organization I'm going to use, and here in the select column I'm going to utilize email status, and I'm going to apply a filter row here. Okay, so that filter row is the one which I mentioned here, approved or rejected by user. So these are the two values. So let me take it here. So that is approved, that's value, and then behind the scene there is a number for this, and also this is rejected. Okay, so that's approved or rejected. These are the two values. Okay, so that's the trigger. Okay, and the next step is we need to get the list rows again, and I'm going to add a note here for waiting for approval. Waiting for approval, and this is the one, it's email reminders. And in the action step I'm going to use again another filter rows. That's the one. So that means it's waiting for approval, and that is equal to such and such. That means we know that this flow has completed for that, but there's any pending runs there or not, which we sent. So this is the technique we use for finding the existing one, whether it's running or not. That means the good news now here is I can add and apply to each loop again, map the value from the previous step, and then I'm going to utilize cancel flow. Okay, so there's a cancel flow run here under the Power Automate management. So you need to type Power Automate. I'll show you that. It's quite tricky that sometimes to get it. Yeah, you need to type flow actually. So I always forget that. So type flow, you will see Power Automate management here. So select that. Then you need to use the cancel flow run here. And then here you need to select your current environment. So the environment I'm using here is spinhope dev. So you need to select that right environment. That's where your flow is running, where it's sending the the initial email and sending the reminders, all that. So the environment you need to select correctly, and then the flow, the whichever that flow it is, so that means our second flow, which is send reminder email. Here we go. Send initial email reminders. Oops, I selected the wrong one there. Send initial reminder emails. Then the run ID. So the run ID is coming from the flow run session ID. See that? So this is very important. That is coming from this previous step. So this is where it's going to cancel that existing runs. But once it cancelled, what I'm doing is, for the audit trial, I'm going to use the update row again inside the same loop again. So update row, yeah. And here I'm going to use email reminders. Then the email reminder, that is coming from the previous step again. That's ID of the record, where we can set the email status value to system cancelled, because the other one is actually approved by the user. So the rest of the runs we are cancelling using the system cancelled. So that's a final flow. So that's a build. It's been done. So the next thing is I'll demo. We will just run through it and see everything works. Okay. So let me clear all this. Okay, so here the approval is my Gmail address, and I'm going to create my first, there are no records here. I'm going to create my first invoice here. So let's call it as invoice 500. Let's put the price as 7,899 and waiting for approval. Save and close. So this means our second email should trigger, and that will send the initial email out. So here it is. So I received my first email now. So it comes my Gmail and it says approved or rejected. I'm not going to respond to this. So the plan now is I'm going to my email reminder record. So it's created the the email reminder record, and that says invoice 500. That's the ID of the record which we are storing. So if I open this record, you can go back to the end of the the URL. You can see 8CDD starting with. And if I may take you back to the record, you can see that's the ID. Then the flow ID is the second flow which we built. And then the flow run session ID is the ID which I captured using the Parse JSON step. Remember the workflow step, workflow expression we used. That's the ID of that. And then it's set to waiting for approval. So the plan is I'm going to use, because it's more than a day, it need to trigger the second email. So to do that, that's the reason I made this as a write record, so that I can go and modify this just for the demo. Generally you can make all this as read only, so that nobody can edit this, because it's all system generated. For the demo purpose, I just made this as editable. Okay, so I'm going to set this to 23rd then. Okay, and save it. So in theory, we should trigger the next flow then. So that's the it won't trigger automatically because it's a recurrence a day actually. So every day. So remember, it's runs on every day only. So let's go back and run that flow manually now. So you can see here, the very first one, when an invoice is created. Let me open it and show you that. The very first one 2 minutes ago, that's the first one, and that flow ran successfully. And you can see that's sent to the child flow, which is email is true. So that means let me take you to the second flow then. That is send initial email and reminder, which we built, and that is running now. See, that is running now. Ignore the other runs, which I'm not using that. That's which I was testing that earlier. So this is the one is 2 minutes ago. That one is running. Okay. Let me cancel all these 3 ones now. Oh, okay. So I canceled that manually, which is my previous runs. Just ignore that. So for the demonstration purpose, we have only one running now at the minute. Okay, that's the initial email being sent. Okay, now let's go back to the next one, which is send initial email. So yeah, that's right. And we need to use the third one now. Third one is the recurrence flow. So I'm going to run that now. So that's going to send another record now. Okay, so that is going to find out which is the email which is more than 1 day old. Remember the expression we put, that is 23rd I put. So that means it's going to run and create another record as well. So that means there are 2 now. So that flow ran successfully. You can see here that ran successfully. So let me open that flow now. So this should have that flag. Is email should be the first email, the one in the body one. So it's false now. Again, it's using the same invoice ID and sending that. So that means it's triggered our second flow which we built. And let's go back to the second one. So we should, when I refresh this, we should have 2 instances running now. Here we go, there are 2 running now. So let's open that record again. So that is 25th again, which is today's date. So I'm going to change that again to yesterday's date. This is mainly for the demonstration purpose, nothing else. I edited the record. So that means we send on the initial email on 23rd, then 24th. And again, customer hasn't responded. So that means I'm going to run that flow again, actually send initial retrieve records waiting for approvals. So I'm going to run that again now. Okay, there we go. That succeeded 3 seconds ago. So let me take you back here, refresh this record, this entity here. So you can see there are 3 now. So so we send on 23rd, 24th, 25th. Here we go. That's the right scenario here now. So let me open my Gmail now. So you can see the first email, which we put the invoice subject as invoice, the email subject as invoice amount approval. All the other ones we got reminder and reminder here. See that? Okay, so user can click on any of this and approve it. So I'm going to use the middle one. Okay, he has seen it now, and he may be on holiday, come back and just say, okay, I've got a couple of I can see all that same reference, so let's approve it. So I'm going to take the second one. You can take the third one, doesn't matter now. So I'm going to take the second one and say approved, confirm approved. So what that should do now is, let me open this record and keep refreshing this. So that is approved now. So that means this is approved. The main record also approved, the actual invoice. So let me go back to reminder now. These 2 still pending now. This is waiting now still. So this is the one, the cancel flow is going to work out now, saying give me the unique values and which is approved. And then I'm going to cancel the other flow runs. So hopefully that is run now. See that? Now you can see now here, the system has cancelled that. So if I may open this record, see that system cancelled. And if I take this also, system cancelled. So that means if I open our these 2 flows, see that it's running and running. So if I refresh it, you can see one is succeeded, the other 2 is cancelled. These are the ones it is, the latest ones. Ignore the other flows, which is my earlier test ones are. So see, so that means system has cancelled, nothing is pending also here. So this is a technique we can utilize for finding the workflow properties, getting the session IDs, then put some logic around it to cancel all the other runs and approve it. You can extend this for multi-level approvals, and different ways you can set this now using this logic. I will do another video regarding two-level authentication also. Okay, so let's go back to so these are the 4 flows we built. This is the very first one when invoice created. The second one is a HTTP flow, so that I'm utilizing this flow under the when invoice created and also under the retrieve records waiting for approvals. So both send emails. This one responsible for sending the initial email, passing the details to here, using that flag, the initial email true or false. And again here as well, the retrieve records waiting for approvals. So if I take this record here, the send initial email and reminders, that's the one is a child flow, which is a big build. There are quite a lot of action step there. And remember, that's when an action step received, you save the flow, you get this, you need to click on the copy URL, that's the one. And then what you need to do there is you need to go back to your very first flow which you built, or you can build the second flow first basically, then you can come back here and then paste that. So that's the URL I pasted here. Remember that. Okay, that's quite crucial here. And again for the third one, which is the retrieve one. The retrieve one which sends an email out, and again that is again it's the same flow we are utilizing it, but only thing here is the first email is false, and then again we are using the email token ID for the audit trials. So you can see here, there are one user set that to approved, which is on the 24th day, the email he clicked, then all the other ones he ignored it. But the system find out which are the ones it's been, we need to cancel it, and the system has set that to system cancelled. So, and there are no instance of the flow running as well. That's the beauty of this this build actually. So generally, there is a timeout you can set under the send email options, and so let's go back and show you that where that it is. Yeah, so here send email options, you can have the settings, and here you could put a duration of the time there. You can look some documentation about the ISO 8601 format. If you search on internet, you should be able to find it and use that format here. You can put hours, days, things like that. So put that format. And then if that fails, if that doesn't come back in the time, then it will time out basically. That's why the flow works out of the box, it works. Whereas in this demo, what I shown here is, we're not setting any time there. I believe then it works, it goes up to 25 days or 30 days. I can't remember. You need to look the documentation for that. But anyway, we set, we set a rule like if it's more than a day, send the reminder emails, and whichever one the user is going to click it, they can set it to, approve or reject it. And then system will find out the other flow and cancel all the runs also. So if I go back to my initial email which I got and click on approved, what will happen is confirm approved. See, the flow is not running state, it was complete or cancelled. That's what you get. Okay, so hope this build is useful. I know it's a big long video this is, and hope this is really useful. If you have any questions, please comment on my video on the YouTube comments also. I'll try to reply as soon as possible. Thank you for watching.